With tens of millions of ballots to be cast on the 5th of November, the American presidential election is poised to go down right to the wire. Now, according to CNN's last nationwide poll before the elections, the Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump and his Democrat rival, the Vice President Kamala Harris, are tied at 47% each amongst the voters. The poll was conducted by phone between the 20th till the 23rd of October amongst 1,704 registered voters. It has a margin of error of about 3.1 percentage points. Now, keenly aware of this, both candidates, Trump and Harris, are turning to famous venues in the last-mile dash to woo the voters. In fact, they are leaving no avenue untapped. On Sunday, the former American President Donald Trump is returning to his hometown of New York for a rally in one of the city's most iconic landmarks, which is the Madison Square Garden. Notably, New York and Madison Garden have always been hostile to the Republicans and the former president himself. Now, Trump had lost the state by about 23 percentage points in 2016 and 2020. The New York courts have handed him 34 felony convictions and fines running into millions of dollars. But this time, Trump, who has made his name in New York, has asserted that, contrary to the polls, he will carry the state. On the other side, 2 days after Trump's rally, Vice President Kamala Harris will address an event at the Ellipse, the park on South Lawn of the White House, and the venue is significant. This is where one of Trump's fiery speeches nearly 4 years ago had set the stage for the attack on the U.S. Capitol. Now, business leaders also seem to be aware of the implications of calling the election wrong. On Friday, Jeff Bezos-owned Washington Post said that it will not be endorsing a presidential candidate in the 2024 elections. It's also said that its billionaire owner, Jeff Bezos, had himself made the decision to refrain from endorsing Trump's rival Kamala Harris. Curiously, the announcement came on the same day as when Trump met with the leaders from the Bezos-owned aerospace company Blue Origin after his speech in Austin, Texas. The Washington Post had endorsed Trump's opponents in 2016 and 2020. It has endorsed the presidential candidate consistently for at least the last 30 years. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what, of course, is unfolding in American politics at the moment, we're being joined by Ms. Elizabeth Lurris, who's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, and she's joining us live on this broadcast. Now, Ms. Lurris, this is going right down to the wire. The latest opinion poll by CNN has suggested that both candidates, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, have 47% of the registered voters who are backing them. What is your take in terms of how the public opinion at this moment looks like in the United States?
Well, things seem to be tightening up in former President Trump's favor. Vice President Harris had been leading, again, by small margins. I think in September, maybe the largest margin she was leading by was about 2 points. But then since October 1st, things have tightened up in Trump's favor. And, it may be because she has come out and she's doing more public appearances and people are getting to know her more. And they're looking at the, President Trump's administration where the economy was quite good compared with now. And we know that people vote with their pocketbooks. All politics are local. And so, inflation has come down a lot in the last year or two. However, prices are still high. And so you put that together with, a lot of other things that are happening, around the world, and immigration, illegal immigration, of course, is still a very big issue. Right. And a lot of voters are perhaps not convinced by what Vice President Harris is saying, or they favor Trump on those issues.
Immigration and economy, of course, are the two weak points in terms of how Kamala Harris's campaign looks like. But you mentioned that Kamala Harris has been giving a lot of public appearances. She's given interviews. And one of the questions that she's been asked again and again is what would she do differently in comparison with 4 years of Joe Biden? And every time she comes out and says that she would not do a thing differently from what Biden has done in the last 4 years of his presidency. So the question that has come up is, how will Kamala Harris's presidency be different from the last 4 years of Joe Biden? Because not many people in America would be very enthusiastic of having 4 more years of Joe Biden.
Well, it's hard for me to answer that if she won't answer that. However, she is, I think she was on The View, I forget which program it was, and they asked, what would you do differently? And she said she couldn't think of a thing. But then one of her, mantras, slogans, whatever you want to call it, is change. It's time for change. We need change. We can't go back. But change from what? Because she and President Biden have been running the government for 4 years. So I think it's those kinds of things that are really confusing people. I think that at the DNC, Democratic National Convention, when she was, introduced, and in September, people, the voters were giving her the benefit of the doubt. But now that they've gotten to know her a bit better, they are, I suppose, not as enthusiastic.
I think that's an important point. And also, what is your assessment of Jeff Bezos' Washington Post, which has said this time around that it would not be endorsing any candidates? It has endorsed a candidate for the last 30 years, and in the last 2 elections that Trump has contested, it has endorsed the Democrat candidate, Hillary Clinton in 2016 and Joe Biden in 2020. But this time around, the Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, has refused to endorse any candidate. What do you think is the significance of this?
I think there are a couple of things going on. If they're reading the tea leaves, which I'm sure they are, there's a good sense that former President Trump really could win this thing. And they don't want to be on the wrong side. They don't want government regulation or a Trump administration to hurt their business. The Washington Post and the LA Times, that has also decided, not to endorse this year. They're both owned by billionaire businessmen. They bought those newspapers. Those newspapers were on the cusp of folding. They're not money making, they're money losing. And so these guys came in and they bought the papers, and the papers survived to another day because of the infusion of cash from these billionaires. They're not getting the money from subscriptions. I don't even know if they're making it from ads anymore. And so they want to keep this business going. And a business decision is to go with the ones who, potentially seem like they're the leader. So It's more. It could also be a business decision, not just a political one.
All right, interesting. And my final quick question to you, Ms. Loris, is this. In your opinion, who do you think the business class at this moment, the entrepreneurial class, the business class, is backing between these 2 candidates, and why?
Well, I believe the small business class and the non-billionaire business class favor former President Trump because of the lack of regulation. One of the first things he did when he came in 2016 was to cut regulation on business. And so if I'm running a business, I want to be able to plan for next year, 5 years, 10 years. So I need to know what the field is going to look like. So the businesses, we've seen a intra-party realignment. I mean, look how many Democrats, Liz Cheney, her father, a bunch of Democrat members of Congress, they're now supporting, the Republicans are now supporting Harris, who's a Democrat. But then former Democrats, RFK Jr., Musk, and Tulsi Gabbard now are supporting Republicans. So we see a real shift. So you can almost say, okay, look at the former Democrats, they're going to go Republican. Look at the former Republicans, they're going Democrat this year.
All right, will be very interesting to watch out there. Thank you very much indeed, Ms. Elizabeth Loris, for joining us and getting us that perspective.
Welcome.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.